Hey community, welcome back. And if this is your first time here, I'm Dr. Blaire, a doc in clinical psychology, and on this channel, we discuss psychology, inspiration, social justice, and all topics in between. First things first, hit that subscribe button. I need to see you back next week and stay tuned. If you have watched The Ultimatum and you've ever thought during the entire show, this is a hot mess, stay tuned. Okay, so The Ultimatum is a show on Netflix for those who have not seen it or heard about it. And it is hosted by Nick and Vanessa Lachey. They both are sharing their experience of them being a couple before they were married and also the transition into them being married, which essentially ended up in what they're calling this ultimatum, where they decided either we're going to stay together and get married or we're going to go our separate ways. And so this show has been created or is based off of their own experience. And so multiple people, multiple couples are coming onto this show where they're at this crossroad of deciding either we stay together and get married or we're going to go our separate ways. And one person in each couple is presenting this ultimatum of just that. And there are various reasons why the other person in the relationship has decided that they're not ready to move forward, or, the things that are holding them back, the barriers that are in the relationship. Maybe it is that they want their relationship to be more healthy. Some people said that they want to be more financially stable, an array of reasons that contributed to this hang up moment. But as the couples come together in this experience, the big part about it for them to help to decide whether they're going to move forward or not is actually dating each other. Sounds messy, right? Well, it gets messier. I want to recognize a few key components that I saw during the show, because we don't have time for all of them. But one thing that really stood out to me during this experience that they were going through was the communication. Like, I think that we hear all the time that communication is key, and we like to really say that. But honestly, it's not just the communication, it's also the comprehension part, but we're not going to get into that. Communication is key, but I think a lot of times we end up in this shaky place where we're not actually at the place to communicate what we're feeling. And I saw that as several moments in this series where multiple people were feeling one way or the other, and they hadn't fully processed it, but prematurely either tried to communicate how they were feeling or were stuck in that moment. Like Ray, she had a moment where she was stuck and she wasn't able to communicate or comfortable to communicate all of what she was feeling. Part of it was she was still, allowing her brain to catch up with what she was feeling emotionally. Now, a lot of people don't know that scientifically that actually lines up with how our brain works. We have difficulty actually retrieving words, finding the things to say when we are in more of an emotional state. And that's because it's operating in two different areas of the brain, and more of our neurons, which is like our brain's electricity, our communication in our brain, is going to focus in more of one area versus another, simply because that's what we're feeling more or that's what we're thinking more. And so it kind of shifts its energy and isn't always balanced when we have a heightened sense in one area versus the other. And I think that's just fascinating when we actually expect one another to be able to do one thing versus the other when we're not really wired to do that. But Ray had this moment where she was stuck in her emotions and she was not really able to articulate and communicate to her partner how she was feeling. And there was, a lot of reactions. People have a lot of thoughts about that moment, about that scene, and not to get into that as much as I think it's really important that we as human beings, when we have moments where we are still processing, acknowledge I'm still processing that. That's what we can communicate. I'm still processing how I'm feeling. And I, can discuss it with you later on. But sometimes we just end up freezing and we have that fight, flight, freeze moment or fawn, and we get stuck and or we end up responding in ways that we may not necessarily have wanted to do. So it's definitely easier it's definitely much difficult when you're in that moment versus not. But it's something that we have to continue to practice. Even myself, I have to practice it. It takes practice, y'all. this experience agitated so many pressure points for them. And I mean, even as viewers, it got intense at times, but can you imagine how much more intensified it was for them while they were in the experience? And so you had the pressure points that were being pushed as individuals and also as couples, especially when they had to, break apart temporarily for 3 weeks and date one another and live with each other. I forgot to mention that earlier. They had to live in the same apartment for 3 weeks with one another, and it was what they called as a trial marriage, where they got to see what it was actually like to live with one another as if they were a married couple, but with someone, a complete stranger, someone you literally just met and probably only talked to a few times. And so, as you can imagine, lots of change going on, which I'll talk about in a sec. But here, the pressure points that are being pushed, and we all have our pushing, we all have our, like, line where it's like, all right, don't push past this line. I've got a boundary and I don't need you to cross it at this point. And I think every single person on this show was tested at some point in time, whether it was on camera or off camera, because I'm sure it was a lot of footage that was taken that we did not get to see. But everybody had a pressure point that was pressed in some type of way. And it then, flooded up all of these things that were connected to that pressure point. And I thought it was very interesting getting to watch and see all of these pressure points be pressed and also get to see how they responded to that pressure point. Because it's actually, probably the most important part there. We all have pressure points in some point, way, shape, or form. That's just natural. But how we respond to it, one being pressed versus another, is really where our character gets to come out. And I think it reveals not only our, greatness, but it reveals our growth areas that we need to work on. And this is not necessarily to shame the cast members, because I think this is just a natural reaction that whenever you have too many pressure points being pressed at one point in time, we are all very, we're all at a point where we could just, blow up. And we saw multiple blow up moments between Zay. We saw blow up moments with Ray. We saw blow up moments with Shanique even. And we saw blow up moments with Kobe and Madeline. I don't want to go through everybody's name at this point, but I'm pretty sure April was on there as well. Everybody had a blow up moment where it was just too much for them. And sometimes that was expressed out of frustration. Sometimes it was out of tears. Sometimes it was, yeah, I need to walk away. And other times it was, I'm going to shut down. But everybody had a moment where it was like, okay, this is too much for me. And I want to be fair that we saw some from more people versus another, but we know editing was involved. Netflix, y'all ain't right for that. We should have saw from everybody. But nonetheless, everybody had a pressure point that was pressed in one way, shape, or form. And it manifested in so many different ways. And I commend this crew for being able to step in and go through this experience and allow us to see the pressure points. But I think it also showed, and if people are really paying attention, it could show a lot about yourself and how you might respond. Because how could you not watch this and wonder how you would respond if you were in this situation? I mean, really, you guys, we got to watch stuff like this and actually pull on our own empathy strings, because it's really easy to be like, all day long. But what if it was you? If it were you on a Netflix show where the whole world were watching, and I'm sure there are times that they may not necessarily have been in a place to even think about all of the people that would see this experience, as much as they were being captured on camera and having real life experiences. That's difficult. And the self evolution that we got to see. So many of them transformed during this process. Great thing is, during this transition or this transformation, this evolution process that they were going through, you got to see this experience of them learning about themselves, learning about other people, learning how they better respond, and actually the switch up to another person. I think it was less about, not necessarily about them switching and being in a relationship with another other person temporarily, but more so the fact that they weren't in their norm. They weren't in what was necessarily their usual. And that put them in a position to have to really focus on themselves, but also focus on the things that they don't experience on an everyday. And it actually exposed other areas that they could work on or pay attention to. And so people went through this quick self evolution where they were changing or they brought other parts of themselves out. They got to kind of reevaluate their priorities. And that was a beautiful process to be able to see. And I know that it was painful for y'all. I'm sure it was painful for y'all, but it was great because in the reunion show, we got to hear a lot of them say, this is what I learned. This is what I'm taking away from this. Kudos to y'all, especially after having such an abrupt transition. I mean, I might have be mixing up the timeline a little bit, so drop in the comments if I got it mixed up and correct me. Let me know what it was. But if I remember correctly, they started the show, met one another. They had right after that, they transitioned right into breaking apart and then dating one another at these mixers, multiple mixers that they had, and boom, they had to make a quick decision of who they wanted to go through this experience with for the next 3 weeks. Spent that time in a temporary marriage or relationship with the other people that were on the show, and then quickly after that, for another 3 weeks, spent time together with their original partner. That was a lot of abrupt changes, not much time in between to really sit back and process. And so for a lot of people, I can imagine they probably going through like brain overload because it was so much information, so much to process about themselves, about other people, about the world. And when you're considering so much for such a large decision for your life, something that many people go into relationships or marriage with the thought of this is a lifetime, and marriage can change so much about your entire life from a single person to not being to being a couple who is in a committed long-term relationship, marriage. You're joining a lot of things, and that's a big decision to make. Many of us would agree, but it's even a larger decision to make with so much pressure on you, so many eyes and cameras on you, and so many transitions that have to be made in such short time. It's abrupt. That was a lot. It was a lot. Like, I'm wondering, I know that they've had a lot of attention, but I'm wondering how y'all doing after all of that. Are y'all all right? Like, how were those transitions then? But really, I can imagine you're probably still going through transitions now simply because it's so much attention on this. And I'm sorry if I'm not helping add into the pot, but I just had to come and talk about this real quick. Witnessing the strange allegiance, I can't really call it anything else other than strange allegiance, especially, actually, these 2 points go together because there was a strange allegiance and then also getting to see how people communicated about their partner when their partner wasn't there. Like, that was interesting. And so on the side, you had all of these things to say about your partner. For example, Madeline said a lot of things about Kobe in private or when he wasn't around, but then later on they were, they were able to get together, they married one another, they committed to one another, and congratulations on your new baby. But it was interesting seeing this allegiance that they had with one another, but also so much friction during the process from one person to the next. And then when they got back together, it switched on over and feels like the tables were turned. Like, seeing that dynamic was quite interesting, and it actually brings up a lot of questions and makes me wonder, like, what are other components that contributed to that? Simply because I'm sure we couldn't see everything. Everything wasn't aired, as I mentioned earlier. Like, all of this is edited, but it makes me really wonder, like, what else, is twisted in this? What else are we not seeing that contributed to that change and that shift in dynamic? Because it was fascinating. But most importantly, there were so many strange allegiances to one another, and they demonstrated that in a way that felt quite odd, and it really brought that Netflix did a great job showing the conflict, the internal conflict that many of them had. Even people who presented the ultimatum, there was moments where they were having conflict, especially after the transition back into going to your original relationship that you came onto the show with, when they had the last 3 weeks together, that transition of really having to deal with the fact that you were with someone else for 3 weeks, I was with someone else for 3 weeks, and again, they didn't have any time to really process that, and it was boom, going straight into what you came into the show with, your original partner. And it was, I mean, I'm sure the brain was like, wait, what's going on here? Emotion was like, wait, what's going on here? Behavior was like, wait, what's going on here? And that explains a lot of the conflict in this strange allegiance that we saw. So let's address something that's a bit more serious. The state of the dating world is a hot mess, a hot funky mess. Like, that's the real hot mess here, y'all. Like, it's a hot mess. I'm saying that jokingly only because I think a lot of us who are unmarried or desire to be in a long-term committed relationship are saying, the dating pool has urine in it, has pee in it, but it really is a hot mess. And I think that that is why we are seeing so many dating shows or relationship driven shows, not only because it's the thing that people are interested in, it grabs a lot of attention, but really I think that people are having a strong desire for change when it comes to how relationships are operating now. And something happened socially in our society that drastically shifted the marital rate. And so you have so many single people who are interested in maybe not getting married, but being in a relationship and having a successful relationship, whatever they define being in a successful relationship as. But so many people are interested in that. And so we have an influx of dating relationship type shows that are going forth, but a lot of them are focused on actually getting people mated together. And I'm noticing that they're shifting it away from a lot of the superficial types of things that we will see in dating shows prior to, and more about bringing in substance and really pushing people to get to know them. And actually, if you pay attention, it actually is giving people this unspoken rubric of this is how you need to go about dating. And it's like now the media is taking this spin on, we want to teach people or give people other options of how to get that successful relationship that they are desiring. Now, hats off to y'all. I actually am I'm for that as much, but we need a little bit more of it, not necessarily more of it in the media, but more so a little bit more of it to translate into everyday life. And I'm wondering, is it translating over, or are we still in that curve where we have to wait another 3, 4, 5 years for it to get to the mainstream society where people are actually going to incorporate some of these things that they are seeing modeled in these shows? I love the fact that people are brave enough to go and do something to get different results, because that is the definition of crazy. I know that you all are like, oh, you're a doctor in clinical psychology, you shouldn't say crazy, but crazy is at its core doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. Like, we cannot expect different results. And these folks said, look, I want different results. And they went for something to get different results. And I would probably say that they accomplished it. Job well done. So, my question to you all is, what do you need different results for? Because you have to switch it up. If you've been doing the same thing over and over again, you're not getting the results that you desire. You got to change it up, honey. You got to change it up. And last but not least, kudos out to Nick and Vanessa Lachey. Y'all, as a couple, as a married couple, are not only bringing couples together, challenging them to look at the core components of their relationship, really helping people to be better, but y'all also securing the bag at the same time. I mean, you can't get mad at that. We love you. We want to see more of you. Netflix, they get my vote. Keep them around, please. Thank you. All right, community, y'all got my 2 cents. Drop in the comments what you think about this show as well, what you thought about this review. But most importantly, I kind of feel like another review is coming soon. I guess you're going to have to stay tuned. Stay tuned for some more. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Share with someone else who has watched The Ultimatum and thought some of the same thoughts as me. And remember, before you go, if I'm great and you're great, then we're a great community.